Moving on to a new topic today, we are going to be looking at inverses. Inverses are basically, if you remember from algebra, where you kind of go backwards, okay? So I'm today going to give you the value that the value of a sine function or a cosine function or a tangent function. You're going to go back and give me where it happens at, what angle it happens at. So I'm going to give you the value or the proportion, and you're going to tell me what angle it happens at, okay? We have these restricted intervals right here. So just so you know, this is kind of what's shaking down with inverses, okay? Normally what would happen is I would give you this. I would say sine at some spot is, and I would give you this spot. Let's say I would say 30 degrees, okay? And you would tell me what that is, okay? So sine at 30 is something, and you would be able to go to your unit circle and look that up. When you do inverses, you're going to do the opposite of that, and that's what this is kind of telling you here, is I'm going to give you the spot or the value of it, and you're going to give me the spot, okay? We have these restricted intervals, and here's why, okay? So this one for sine means your answers can only be between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. So first of all, if you're thinking of the unit circle, here's positive pi over 2, here's negative pi over 2. So your answers can only be between there and there. So your answers can be in these two quadrants right here. It has to be greater than negative pi over 2, but less than positive pi over 2. So your answers can only be between there and there. Here's why you're doing that, okay? If you think back a long time now it's been, but to the sine graph that we did, here was the sine graph, okay? And it's a function. It passes the vertical line test. That's the sine curve. When we do the inverse of that, we switch the x and the y around. And when we switch the x and the y around, your function kind of ends up looking something like this. Now it's not a function. It doesn't pass the vertical line test. If I draw a vertical line through that graph, it will cross in more than one point at a time. So it's not a function. So what they do is they restrict your intervals and say, you know what, I'm only going to let you for sine have answers between here and here. Because if I only allow you to give answers between here and here, now it's a function and it will work, okay? So whenever you see these -1 symbols in your problem, which you're going to see a lot, or the word arc, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, it means that you are doing inverses and you can only have answers that are in the restricted intervals, and that is it, okay? So here's the first example, excuse me. I'm asking you to find the inverse of sine, where sine is 1, okay? Inverse sine of 1, that's what I'm asking you to find, inverse sine of 1. Just so that you can see it better written out, what I'm asking you to figure out is sine at some spot on the unit circle is 1, and your job is to fill in the blank there. What is that spot? What is the angle where sine is 1? So you're going to need your unit circles, okay? Sine, if you remember, when you're looking at the unit circle, is only your y value. So you're looking for the spot on the unit circle where your y value is 1. And remember, they go like this. This is your x coordinate and then your y coordinate. So you're looking for the spot or spots, sometimes there's more than one, where your y value is 1. Here's the place where my y value is 1, which happens to be at pi over 2. The book will give you answers in radians, so I'm just going to have you write your answers in radians. If you wrote it in degrees, that would be fine too, but the book's answers will be in radians. So the answer to this is pi over 2, and I only have one spot. Okay? This is asking us to figure out arc cosine, and our book does not use the word arc, but many math books do, and you'll probably need to know this for the ACT test as well. Arc means the same thing as inverse. So arc cosine of 0 is the same thing as inverse or -1 cosine -1 of 0. Okay, these two things can be switched around. They mean the exact same thing. So whenever you see the word arc in front of it, it is the same as writing cosine of cosine -1, cosine inverse, okay? And again, both of these mean this. Cosine at some spot on the unit circle is 0, and you need to figure out what that spot is, or all the spots that that happens at. Okay, so cosine at some spot is 0, and your job is to figure out what this spot is. Remember that cosine is your x value when you're looking at the unit circles, so you need to figure out where your x value or your cosine value is 0. Your cosine value is 0 here at pi over 2, and it is also 0 here at 3 pi over 2. Okay, So it is 0 both of those places. So it is 0 at pi over 2 and is 0 at 3 pi over 2. Okay, now, answers can only be in the restricted interval. Okay, so I want you to look at your notes back here, and I should probably have this on a bunch of different slides, but I don't. Cosine is restricted to, if you look, cosine is restricted right here to between 0 and pi. Okay, cosine is restricted to between 0 and pi. So if you think about your unit circle, here is 0, here's pi. Cosine has to be, your answers for inverse cosine have to be greater than 0 and smaller than pi, so they have to be up in here. And remember, this was where pi over 2 was. So pi over 2 fits into that spot, but 3 pi over 2 does not fit into the restricted interval, and I'm not going to count it as an answer. However, I want you to get in the habit of finding all of the spots, because we will be lifting these restricted intervals in a couple days, and I want you to get in the habit of finding all of the spots and then crossing them off instead of finding only one spot. It's going to get you into more trouble later if you do that. So get into the habit of finding all the spots and then crossing them off, because you'll be glad you did later. All right, here's another one. This is asking again, it's the word arc in front of there, but remember that arc means the same thing as inverse sine. And I am asking you again to figure out sine at some spot on the unit circle is -1/2, and your job is to figure out where that is. So I'm going to my unit circle. I'm going to remember that sine is my y value on the unit circle, and sine is -1/2 down right here. My y value is -1/2 there, and my y value is -1/2 here. So 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6 are my two spots that this happens at. 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. And now I want to make sure that they're both in the restricted interval, and probably one won't be. Okay? If you look at the top of your notes, it will tell you that sine is restricted to between -pi over 2 and +pi over 2. Okay, that's the restricted interval for sine. That means that it's this area over here. Okay, which means that this answer will count. 11 pi over 6 will count. 7 pi over 6 is not in the restricted interval, and it's going to get the big old X. Okay, so technically, this 11 pi over 6 counts, the 7 pi over 6 does not. So 11 pi over 6 is our only answer here. Okay, now moving on to some that aren't quite as obvious or quite as easy. This is a tangent one. Okay, tangent, you're needing to figure out where tangent is -√3. Okay, first of all, I want you to remember that tangent is y over x. Notice our tangent was -√3. Okay, -√3. That means tangent is y over x, so that means one of them needs to be negative and one of them needs to be positive. So I know that I'm going to be looking in either quadrant 2 or quadrant 4 is where my tangent values are negative. Okay, tangent's a little trickier. You're going to have to kind of figure out y over x. So I'm going to sort of go through every spot and I'm going to figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. If I take y over x, okay, over here, 0 over 1. Because remember, tangent is sine over cosine. Sine is your y value, cosine is your x value. So sine over cosine, 0 over 1 gives me 0. That doesn't give me √3. Okay, right here, 1/2 over -√3 over 2. Flip that. Cross the 2's out. I'm at -1 over √3. Can't have a radical in the denominator. And I would be at -√3 over 3. That's not it, because I'm needing to figure out where tangent is -√3. If I go up here, and I have √2 over 2 over -√2 over 2, that's going to give me -1. Okay, don't make it any harder than it is. If you have 5 over 5, you have 1. If you have -√2 over 2 over +√2 over 2, you have 1. Okay, that's not it. Let's try up here now, okay, at this spot. Tangent is, again, your y value or your sine value over your x or your cosine. So it's like that. If I flip it, I'm here. My 2's cancel, and by golly, I get -√3. Okay, so one spot is right here at 2 pi over 3. You're going to obviously look in quadrant 4 for that similar spot, only you're going to have your x value be positive 1/2 and your y value be negative 1/2, or negative root 3 over 2. So it'll be down here. Okay, so my two answers are 2 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3 that this happens at. Then I need to look for my restricted intervals. So again, if you go back to that front page, and this is kind of a mess, so I'm going to sort of clear this all out here. Cut some of this out so it's not quite so messy here. Sorry. Almost done. All right, when you look at this, I am doing a tangent problem right now, so I am trying to figure out where tangents restricted intervals are. So I'm looking at this, and I can see that tangent is restricted to negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Notice those are in parentheses, which means that negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2 can't be included themselves. It can go all the way up to negative pi over 2, but it can't include negative pi over 2. And same thing with the positive pi over 2. If it's brackets, remember that you can include exactly that value, okay? So like with sine, I can include exactly negative pi over 2 and exactly pi over 2. Tangent, because they're in parentheses, I can only be greater than or less than those, okay? So back to our problem here. I am looking for tangent at negative root 3. Okay, my two spots were 2 pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. Tangent is restricted to negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. So tangent is over here, which means that this answer will count at 5 pi over 3. This answer over here is not in the restricted interval, and so it will not count. So I have to cross the 2 pi over 3 out, and 5 pi over 3 can stay. All right, a couple more here. This is a secant one. So I know it has the word arc here, but what it's asking you to figure out, again, is cosecant at some spot on the unit circle is 2 root 3 over 3. And you have to figure out what that spot is, okay? And cosecant is not as pretty either. Cosecant, remember, is the reciprocal to your sine value. And remember that sines are y's, so it's basically where is the reciprocal to your y value going to give you 2 root 3 over 3, okay? Where is that going to happen? And I'm going to teach you a little trick here. Figuring out where cosecant is 2 root 3 over 3, by the way, is the same thing as figuring out where sine is 3 over 2 root 3. Sine and cosecant are reciprocals to each other, so we could do that. Okay, and it might be easier to do it this way, and then I don't like my radical in the denominator, so I'm going to give it, get it out of there. So then I have 3 root 3 over, right here, root 3 times root 3 is 3, times 2 is 6. So what I really have is I'm asking you to figure out where is your sine value, and then this reduces root 3 over 2. Okay, so figuring out where cosecant is 2 root 3 over 3 is the same as figuring out where sine is root 3 over 2. Okay, so I'm going to go over here. Remember that sine is your y value. Your y values are root 3 over 2 right here at pi over 3. And your y values are also root 3 over 2 over here at 2 pi over 3. Okay, so 2 pi over 3 and pi over 3 are my two possible choices. Pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3. Okay, now again, I need to find the one that's in the restricted interval. I know we were using our little shortcut and trying to figure out where sine was root 3 over 2, but since this is your actual original problem, you need to use cosecant's restricted intervals. Okay, so if you go back to that front page of ours, cosecant's restricted intervals happen to be the same as sine anyways, so it wouldn't really matter. But again, cosecant is restricted to the right side between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. So I am going to figure that out here. And remember that cosecant is only over here. So this pi over 3 is cool. This 2 pi over 3 is not. Okay? So pi over 3 stays as an answer. 2 pi over 3 has to get the x because it's not in the restricted interval. All right, a couple more here. This one, notice you've got some parentheses. Just like in all math, you're going to do what's inside the parentheses first, which is maybe a little bit tricky for you. So I'm going to do this first. This is asking me to figure out sine at pi over 4. So now I've given you the spot. You're going to go to 5 pi over 4, and you're going to find the sine value. And remember, sine's just your y-coordinate, okay? So I'm going to go to 5 pi over 4. And I'm going to find my sine value, or my y value. So sine at 5 pi over 4 is right here, and it's negative root 2 over 2. Okay? So this part right here is negative root 2 over 2. And now I've got this inverse cosine in front of that. Now, this is asking me to figure out cosine at some spot on the unit circle is negative root 2 over 2. And you're going to need to figure out where that is. Okay, again, cosine is your x value, so you're going to go to your unit circle and you're going to figure out where your x value is negative root 2 over 2. That happens right here at 5 pi over 4. And it also happens right here at 3 pi over 4. Okay, so 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4 are my two choices. And again, I need to figure out which one is in the restricted interval and which one's not. Notice that the -1 symbol is above the cosine. That means you're going to use cosine's restricted intervals here, not sine, but the -1 is above the cosine, so you will use cosine's restricted intervals. If you look at your top of your notes there, you'll see that cosine is restricted to between 0 and pi, so cosine has to be between here and here. And again, I'm getting that from my restricted intervals. It says between 0 and pi, so greater than 0, less than pi. And so this 3 pi over 4 will work, and the 5 pi over 4 will not. So 5 pi over 4 does not work, but 3 pi over 4 does. All right, we're getting there, you guys. Really close here. Okay, again, you're going to work inside out on the parentheses. This piece right here is asking me to figure out secant at some spot on the unit circle is -2. And again, whenever you have secant or cotangent or cosecant, sometimes it's helpful to use this little trick. So figuring out where secant is -2 is the same as figuring out the reciprocal to secant, which is cosine. And the reciprocal to -2 is -1/2. So what's circled, either way, I can figure out where secant is -2 or I can figure out where cosine is -1/2. Okay, easier to figure out where cosine is -1/2. So I go over here. Cosine is -1/2. Cosine is your x value, remember. Cosine is -1/2 right here at 2 pi over 3. And it is also -1/2 right here at 4 pi over 3. Okay, so 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3 are my two choices for what's in here. And again, you're going to need to use restricted intervals, okay? I am going to use secant's restricted interval because the -1 is above secant. Secant is restricted. If you look back at your handy-dandy little thing, we better do this just to double check for you. Secant, you can see, is restricted to between 0 and pi. Okay, so the top half of the unit circle. And I will, let's see, figure that out. So secant is between here and here. So that means this 2 pi over 3 is okay, and the 4 pi over 3 is not okay. Okay, so I know that my answer here is 2 pi over 3. All I've done so far is what's in the circle. Okay, that's it. That's all I've done. Now, I am going to bring down this sine value. I have this 2 right here. What's circled, I figured out to be 2 pi over 3. Okay, if you simplify that, then you have 2 times 2 pi over 3, which is 4 pi over 3. And now this is on your unit circle. Now I'm asking you to find the sine, or the y-coordinate, at 4 pi over 3. Okay, so I go to 4 pi over 3, and I find that value. The y-coordinate right here at 4 pi over 3 is -3 over 2. So my grand final answer to this would be -3 over 2. And that is that. All right, now you're going to need your calculators, you guys. And If I give you your angles in radians, then you need to have, ooh, sorry, this is one more. That's not on your calculator, sorry. Cosine at 3 pi over 4. Okay, so here we go. Cosine at 3 pi over 4. X value at 3 pi over 4. So your x value at 3 pi over 4, if you go over here, your x value at 3 pi over 4 is right here, which is negative root 2 over 2. Okay, so negative root 2 over 2 is what's inside that circle. And then I have this arc sine, which is asking me to figure out sine at some spot on the unit circle is negative root 2 over 2. And you're going to need to figure out what that spot is. Sine, again, is your y value. So your y values are negative root 2 over 2 down here at 7 pi over 4 and right here at 5 pi over 4. Okay, again, you're going to need to use restricted intervals. The arc is, the word arc is in front of the sine, so you'll use sines restricted intervals here, not cosines. Sines restricted intervals is between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. So science answers can be between here and here, and that's good. So this 7 pi over 4 will count, and the other piece of it will not count. Okay? All right, now we're going to go to your calculators. Okay, so these are inverses, you guys. If you have your calculator in degree mode, your calculator will spit out the answer in degrees. If you have your calculator in radian mode, it will spit out the answer in radians. I think it's easier to picture it in degrees, and so we are going to do it in degrees. And let's see, I thought I had my calculator program open, but I must not have, so this will take just a second here. I'm going to put my calculator in degree mode because I think it's easier to picture, and you guys can do the same. So if you don't remember how to do that, you're going to press the mode key. Make sure that degree is highlighted here. Hit enter, and then quit out of here. Okay? Now, in this problem, I am asking you to figure out the inverse sine of 7/8, or where is my sine value, where is my y value, 7/8 on the unit circle. That's what I'm asking you to figure out. Okay? So, notice the sine -1 is blue, and it's above the word sine. So I'm going to go second sine, and then just put in 7/8, and your calculator should spit out an answer. So in this case, it's 61.04 degrees because I have my calculator in degree mode. Okay? So 61.04 degrees. I want you to round these to 2 decimal places. Please don't round them to the nearest whole number. I will think you did something wrong. So please round these to 2 decimal places when you do it. All right. Now, this is secant, okay? And when you go to your calculator, you know that you don't have a button for secant. And so what a lot of people want to do is they want to go they'll go like this. They know that secant is the reciprocal to cosine. And so they'll go like this. 1 divided by cosine at -3. And they'll go like that. Okay, oops, sorry. 1 divided by second cosine of -3. I forgot to press the second button. Sorry. And you'll notice you're going to get a domain error here. Okay? You can't enter them in that way. Okay? You can't do 1 divided by and use the reciprocals quite like that. You have to use the little trick that I taught you earlier. And you know that this is asking you to figure out secant at some spot on the unit circle is 3. And so I can use the reciprocals, but I have to get it into cosine first. Not 1 over cosine. I have to get it into cosine. So the reciprocal to secant is cosine, and the reciprocal to 3 is 1/3. And this is, so figuring out where secant -1 is 3 is the same as figuring out cosine -1 of 1/3. And that's how you have to enter it into your calculator, or you're going to get an error. And just so you remember, here's why you're getting an error, just so you know. Remember that this is the cosine, the normal cosine curve before we shifted it at all. The high point right here before you shift it is at 1, and the low point is -1. there is no spot where I'm going to be able to find a cosine value of 3. So when you're trying to do 1 over cosine of 3, you're going to get an error because your calculator can't do cosine at 3. Okay? Anyways, I have to enter this into my calculator as inverse cosine of 1/3. So I'm going to go second cosine here. Second cosine of 1/3. Close my parentheses, enter, and I'll get 70.53 degrees. So that would be my answer to this problem. 70.53 degrees. Okay? So that'll do it. You'll have some time in class to work on homework, and we will see you next time.